The honourable member for Aston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
The member for Aston has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is addressed to the Attorney-General. Would the Attorney-General update the House on the government's efforts to put beyond doubt the definition of marriage? That definition being that marriage...
Member for Aston will resume his seat. The honourable member for Aston.
Thank you, Mr.
Member for Aston has the
Thank
call.
you, Mr Speaker. Well, thank you. So my question again is to the Attorney-General if he would update the House on the government's efforts to put beyond doubt the definition of marriage. That is, that marriage is the union of a man and a woman to the exclusion of all others voluntarily entered into for life. Attorney, are there any alternative approaches?
Member. Member, Deputy Prime Minister. Member for Lawler, Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On a point of order, this question was asked yesterday. It's been fully asked and answered. There can be no update over the last 24 hours because the matter hasn't changed on the legislative program.
The Leader of the House, Minister of Health and Ageing.
Mr Speaker, on the point of order,
the Leader of the House will resume his seat. Very early in question time, I warned the member for Brisbane. I have heard persistent interjection subsequently, and he will excuse himself from the House. The Leader of the House, Minister for Health and Ageing.
Mr Speaker, I've just consulted the Hansard, and today's question is quite different from yesterday's question, and it asked for an update, specifically asked for an update.
The Manager of Opposition Business, the member for Lawler.
Mr Speaker, the effect of the question is exactly the same as yesterday's. Maybe the member for Aston could clarify by telling us what's changed.
Member for Lawler will resume her seat. I do not have the sort of photographic memory that enabled me to know precisely what yesterday's question was. I know the member for Lawler was right in that a question similar to the question just asked had been asked. However, since it is not identical, it does not fall outside the standing orders. The Attorney-General has the call.
I thank the honourable member for Aston for giving me an opportunity to update some of the developments that have occurred in relation to this matter in the last 24 hours. But let me first affirm that the vast majority of Australians agree that marriage is the union of a man and a woman to the exclusion of all others voluntarily entered into for life. And for this reason, and to remove any concern, the government is determined that there shall be passed amendments which will enshrine this definition in legislation.
Member for Lawler.
But I am aware of multiple commitments, I might say, that seem to have been emerging from the Australian Labor Party. The Australian Labor Party seek to assure the Australian public that its policy is one and the same with the government's, that is, in protecting the sanctity of marriage. And I won't repeat again the statement made to the Marriage Forum by the Shadow Minister, save to say that one would have thought that it was an unambiguous and clear position. But a day is a long time in the Australian Labor Party, and when the pressure is on, out come the weasel words and the backdoor deals. Because from today's media reports, it's clear that the Labor Party has been promising one thing to one audience while leaving the door open to review policy after an election. And according to the Australian today, in the face of the backlash, as we're told it is, from the left, the opposition leader has promised a review of gay relations. Let me just read from the Australian what it has to say. He says Labor will examine options to achieve a more consistent national treatment of all de facto relations. And it goes on to say Labor left members said the amendments moved by the Labor leader opened the door for gay unions to be registered officially if Labor won government. So what we have, of course, is a new commitment, I think ill-conceived, but wheeled out on the run to deal with the heat of this argument in caucus. And the leader obviously has little knowledge of the nature of our constitution and where powers are contained in relation to these matters. Because the one question the leader ought to have asked is where he would get the power to set up such a national register. Where would the power come from? It certainly wouldn't come from the marriage power, because what we're saying is that the marriage power relates to unions between a man and a woman. Wouldn't come from the marriage power. It couldn't come from the matters that have been referred to the Commonwealth by the states, and there have been some matters referred to the Commonwealth by the states. The Commonwealth has received powers to deal with issues relating to the regulation of de facto relationships, that is, where there are children of a de facto relationship or property in relation to a de facto relationship, but that certainly doesn't go to giving the Commonwealth powers to establish a national register. All I can assume is that there must have been something in this statement issued yesterday by a Mr Rodney Crome, where he said after Nicola Roxon broke Labor's promise not to vote on the Howard government's marriage bill before the Senate inquiry had reported, he called for stronger commitments to reform in other areas. That seems to be the genesis of this, and it's an ill-conceived, ill-thought-out proposal where there is no power, and it certainly indicates what the Labor Party has been about to date. Certainly indicates what the Labor Party has been about to date, and that is deliberately delaying this matter so that it wouldn't be dealt with by the Senate in a timely way.